Hello everyone, this is Dark Journalist. Tonight I have a special interview for you with author and deep researcher John W. Warner IV, as the son of banking heiress Catherine Mellon of the powerful Mellon Banking family, and Virginia Senator John Warner. John has come forward on this show to reveal previously unknown details of his family's past. Tonight he'll go deep on the UFO Shootdown incident and how his cousin, former DoD official Chris Mellon, is involved in the UFO threat narrative. Please join us now. John, let's start off with these offices. The UFO office, Arrow, UFO Defense Office, the balloons, the shoot downs, the objects. John, what is going on here?
Well, I agree with Farrell. It's complete and utter. It's nonsense. Are we back to the American Civil War? It's like the Union sends up an observation balloon and the Confederates, they experimented with Congreve rockets, black powder, and they're firing up, what are them Yankees up to now? Get them, boys. Is that what we're at right now? I think it's a factional thing. I think it's part of the deep state is sending up balloons going, hey, send up your fighters. And the other faction shoots them down, which, by the way, an F-22 Raptor has a 25 millimeter Gatling gun cannon. A tenth of a second burst on all those shoot downs would have saved the American people a couple $1 million, probably. So it's ridiculous. I think the Chinese probably knew about it, but my thinking goes more towards it was probably all our stuff. Air Force tests, did you know we were launching balloons? And it's some, ship off the coast of California or Alaska launching these things. Which, by the way, my cousin sent me an email, and it said, did you know there was a Coast Guard cutter named Mellon? And it was named after my great-grandfather, Andrew Mellon. Well, one of its jobs was launching covert balloons with electronics.
Oh, yeah.
The ship was decommissioned 2 years ago, but I thought that was funny. Chris Mellon, maybe this is my new yacht. I'm going out here and launching a few balloons. Yeah.
Well, he jumped right into the middle. It's interesting you mentioned Chris because, of course, the former DoD official who's your cousin is right in the middle of all this UAP, UFO threat stuff. And as soon as these shoot downs started to happen, he almost was jumping for joy in the middle of it and being like, we need to get this UFO issue front and center, and just seemed a little too active for my money. Then he tweets out a picture of him and Elizondo with Gillibrand saying, "We got it done." What does that mean?
All right. Yeah, he's part of the operation.
Yeah.
Whatever happened and whatever the motives were, who benefits? Chris also says the word alien in a lot of his interviews. Not a lot, but he said it at least twice now. But it's always in the context of, see, it wasn't ET.
Right.
It's China or Russia, is the implication. Or Iran, it's the clerics in Iran, of course, with their balloon launching cannons. And who else benefited it? Well, CNN did for 2 days. Tucker Carlson was giddy as hell, saying our airspace is not secure. And as you and JP Farrell and I know, and most of your viewers know, America has the most secure airspace in the world since World War II, if not the solar system. So
absolutely.
That's a bunch of bullshit. I thought that was unconscionable. It's one thing of Tucker, going back and forth, laughing at UFOs and then trying to present them like he's a real part of the disclosure arena, and he's not. I thought that was unconscionable to say that. And
no question, yeah.
Because, a lot of people are like, well, wait a minute, maybe our airspace is unsecure, because next time the implication is, this operation is, well, maybe next time, let's just say it's another faction of the military industrial corporate intelligence complex. Here's a balloon this time. We've got China on board. But next time it's going to be UAPs. Good luck shooting those down with F-22s, because you're going to need a satellite-directed energy weapon to bring down a Lockheed Martin Tic Tac. And so yes, this was a stunt, but it's an indicator. It's a silly indicator, but it's an indicator of, there's sort of, letting it float out there that maybe our airspace is not that secure. And that's a lie. And, any military person will tell you that. Even conventional stuff like satellites, we have a couple space stations out there. I believe there is some sort of presence on the moon, a moon base that's run by the military. No way. I'd find it hard. Anything coming into Earth's atmosphere is not tracked or repelled, as that video once showed, a directed energy weapon shooting at a UFO, and it turned around going, holy shit, and, I think the Earth is pretty secure. I think we let in only approved people from out there, whether it be human factions or ET or whatever. So this whole thing about, our airspace is in jeopardy, but the problem with that is a lot of people in America, I got emails from all over the people either laughing about it or, holy shit, is our airspace compromised?
Yeah.
I said, no, absolutely not. Don't take my word for it. Ask any military person. It's bullshit. If they say it, we don't know, what it is that's coming in and out of our atmosphere, especially the United States and Canada and Alaska. No, we know exactly who it is, what they're flying, and probably what they're doing.
Well, first of all, in 65 years of NORAD, they've never shot anything down.
They tell us.
Right, officially. So they moved the needle there in the wrong direction towards this idea that we're going to shoot things down in space after letting the balloon cruise through the entire United States and not, blasting that until it got off the South Carolina coast. What do you see as the implication of the NORAD/COG/Northcom commander being the point man in the middle of all this, and Stepford Biden, the president hanging out in the background, not doing any real press events until it was over?
Well, Biden's in Ukraine, up to no good. That's not good, because that war is none of our business.
Yeah.
And he's there, and that makes a big worldwide geopolitical statement. I think that's very dangerous stuff. This is a problem. I think you're on the right track with Van Herk. He's COG commander. They might be running a drill, which the military does for everything constantly. They have to. And the drill is, holy shit, we're being invaded by foreign power, and maybe ET in the background somewhere. What do we do about it? It's like, well, the president's in Ukraine. Let's lock down the country. And as you say, it's important to discuss the film 7 Days in May, because that's a seminal film for all of this, which I'd like to add as an aside, a little tidbit I wrote on your comments. I don't remember the name. Burt Lancaster's character, the 4-star general.
James Mattoon Scott.
By a chauffeur, an enlisted chauffeur in a Jaguar. No American general officer or politician or president or anyone would be caught dead in a foreign car, especially in 1963. They all were driven in Cadillacs or Lincolns, the odd Chrysler maybe, but Imperial had a fascist eagle on the back, so they probably eschewed that. But I asked my dad this. I know this for a fact because he was always a Lincoln driver, and a Cadillac used to pick him up. He was Secretary of the Navy, and I was dropped off in school every day with Admiral Zumwalt. He was living in my house.
Wow.
In 1972. Yeah, they were reorganizing the Navy, stem to stern, fore and aft. More women, more lenient rules. Different. They were really shaking up the Navy back then. But that's a small point in that film. But to me, that might suggest some British involvement in the coup, in the storyline, meaning maybe the royal family and the British military, because that Jaguar, most people sort of looked at it and was like, what's that? No, that's a Jaguar Mark 10 sedan. I collect old cars. I know my cars. That's a powerful statement to me because any military person watching that film would say, there's no way a 4-star general will be picked up in a Jaguar. Now, maybe he has it as his personal car back at home in his garage. That's different on the weekends. He could drive that all he wants. But picked up from work and driven around Washington? Hell no. Cadillac or Lincoln limo. So that's just a small point I wanted to make.
Absolutely. What do you make of the fact, going to 7 Days in May, of Roswell being on the map behind the general COG commander who's taking over the United States from the weak sister president?
The film is important in this way as well because it was made in 1963. I think it was released in 64. Hollywood, the producers in Hollywood probably still had some leeway to make it. Remember, they always have to show us the truth, the deep state. To put those small things in there for future generations and nerds like us. Oh my gosh, to see. But I'll bet you after that, remember Dr. Strangelove was still in that vein as well, right around the same year in 64. I'll bet the CIA put the kibosh on Hollywood after that. Now, they did make 2001, which a lot of people shows the secret space program right on the screen. I tend to believe that. That was also a disclosure. So I think they're allowed to do a little bit of disclosure on certain topics, but they got to keep it on the down low. And only, UFO nerds and historians and everything will think, that's strange in the film. So I think it's very important. Dr. Strangelove, even though it's a comedy and satire, 7 Days in May and 2001 Space Odyssey are very important disclosure films from the 60s.
Absolutely.
And afterwards, Close Encounters and things like that.
I guess Manchurian Candidate is also Frankenheimer, who directed 7 Days in May. JFK actually gave Frankenheimer access to the White House to shoot 7 Days in May. He said to aides, "I want people to know what we deal with day to day," suggesting that the premise of the book was that close to the truth.
Yeah, I think Curtis LeMay probably had a cadre of generals and maybe more than a few senators and congressmen behind him at one point and said, we got to get rid of this kid, this PT boat, lieutenant. Let's get rid of his ass. Some of the Navy people, they're sort of split whether or not he's a hero or whether Joe Kennedy made him into a hero because, getting your PT boat that close to a destroyer with your engines off, I wouldn't have done that if you keep them idling. They have mufflers. But anyway, that's a technical point. But yeah, I could see LeMay having a cadre of people with LBJ in the mix, and maybe that morphed into, forget it, let's not oust him. Coup, let's kill him. And make a statement to others to keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
I think that's what eventually happened. Of course, the Nazi aerospace scientists where, they knew LeMay, and he had a tenuous relationship with them from my research. He got along with them okay, but he wasn't a big fan of Nazis either. I think Dave Dare attests to that in his Area 51 story.
Yeah, it's interesting. LeMay, let's just pick up on that because it's going to give us the foundation for the types of things that we're seeing. And how do you get to a Northcom, and how do you get to a Van Herk?
Right, because Van Herk is kind of a modern day LeMay.
Yeah,
I know more about LeMay than I do Van Herk, but he seems to be in that mold.
Yes.
And LeMay came from humble backgrounds. He was a pilot and a mechanic, and then he rose to 4-star general. But boy, he was a hawk. I mean, he laid in low-level night raids with incendiaries on Japan that did far more damage than the atomic bombs. Yeah. His story is incredible. And if you hear other stories about LeMay's involvement with Area 51 and technologies and the UFO file, it gets even stranger and weirder. But you can see you need a neocon hawk, 4-star general in the mix here, because you may be correct, and J.B. Farrell may be correct. If they do if UAPs and Tic Tacs and other shit fills the sky, that will panic some Americans, and they'll crack that COG seal right open, and it's like boom. And,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's the danger.
Yeah, a lot of people would be more comfortable in a dangerous situation with military in control. I personally would not, but Biden as commander in chief, forget it. I'd rather go with Van Herk, as the leader of our country in that capacity. I think Biden and his administration, they're wholly inept at best.
Unbelievable. One of the worst administrations ever hoisted on the American people in the world. When you look at, we'll jump 63 to 2023 a lot coming up. When you look at what they said about the objects during these shoot downs, described as octagonal objects, right?
Yeah, the wording is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course, they showed us pictures of an octagonal insulated electronic package of some sort.
Exactly. Yes.
And but it's obvious they wanted to throw a lot of wording out there, just as I said, Chris Mellon and the word alien. Of course, Chris is using it in the context, oh, don't worry, there's no ET aliens. We've shot them all down, Or, it's not, alien refers to a foreign country. That's why the word alien should be stricken from the entire disclosure arena. And, ET, star being, star nation, to differentiate that clearly, because the American people are just being further led down the confusion, primrose path. And so the wording was meant to confuse.
Why did we get sneak appearances by Justin Trudeau saying, oh, I shot that thing down? We know he didn't do anything. And then the whole business about, oh, it's in Lake Huron. We're going to go find it. Hey, guess what? We have to call off the search because we can't find whatever it was. It's to leave that mystery in the air again. How do you see that?
It's damaging. The whole operation was slightly damaging to the disclosure movement, in my opinion, because it's like someone just pushing you in a hallway. Hey, see, they're balloons and octagonal electronics devices, not ET. You guys are delusional. This is a Chinese problem. Who knows who else was in the mix, a foreign alien power. And they're reinforcing that narrative. Because every time, I may be wrong, but someone correct me, but every time Chris Mellon mentions the word alien, he's like, see, it's not alien. I'm not ruling out an alien foreign power or something like that. It's the wording is very clever. It's stupid, but it's clever in the sense that it can fool most people. It doesn't fool us, anyone watching this, your folks. It doesn't fool anybody, but it does the mainstream public, using object, mystery, unidentified, UAP, it's putting this nebulous, fear of, the doubtful fear into the public, because they're gonna keep, in a year they'll do another operation, and maybe it's with Tic Tacs and other things, and then they'll say, well, the Tic Tacs are Chinese, and made in Taiwan, on the side, but built under license by Lockheed Martin. They're ramping us up for some sort of thing. I think it was damaging a little bit, because it's like, see, you tinfoil hats, shame on you. It's just China balloons, which is completely 1960s, 50s Project Mogul bullshit.
Well, and China would also know their balloons would be going across the United States, and they wouldn't have had a problem with it. So they, on some level, are doing this in combination with the U.S. government.
Yeah, as Farrell said, they don't need balloons. You have satellites. And according to my ONI friend Daniel, it's like the Navy satellites alone, they can see under the earth. They can read the date off your license plate, the tiny little, they can see anything. You don't need balloons. Yeah. The balloon is just a stupid move. They're used to track the weather systems and things like that with electronics. I think they're just surplus weather balloons with junk hanging off them. There's questions about whether a Sidewinder missile would have enough electrical wattage on the balloon to, attract its homing device. So he said, as we're dealing with a 70-watt, electronics package underneath a balloon. Is that enough? I can't remember, 70 volts or 70 watts, and it's like, maybe not. And they're not giving us the details of the new Sidewinders, which are, as as JP said, 70, 60 years old. They're as old as I am, at least, if not older, late 50s.
Right.
Why not use a 1/10 of a second burst 25 millimeter cannon? Now, the shells would go right through the balloon. They'd blow up the electronics portion. And then the spare shells, after they lost, momentum, they would just tumble in the air. But that is a danger on the ground because they're explosive tipped.
Right. But if you're over in the Yukon or like spread out Alaska, I don't know. That
get it briefly, but
the excuses around this were just remarkable. But we had a number of strange things there. Of course, there's another balloon heading our way right now as we speak. It's a new story on that.
P.T. Barnum?
That's all.
I didn't hear.
Let's talk about the organizational side around this. So for a few years, we hear about the UFO threat. We got the TTSA, your cousin Chris, Lou Elizondo, these people promoting this and really going to bat for it. Even after DeLong and the whole front yard of that thing goes away, they come out and they're like, hey, we're going to do books and documentaries on this, and we'll do this unidentified series. Now, in the back of that, all these UFO researchers are falling for it and going along with it. But the staff behind TTSA and all this were predominantly CIA people, Jim Semivan and, career CIA people, hardcore. So my question on this is, now the organizational piece got us this UFO Defense Office, in fact, AARO, attached to the National Defense Authorization Act for the first time. And now they went to bat immediately with 16 senators and all of them who have been, like Gillibrand and Rubio, involved in this. And they're saying, we need more money for this AARO office. It's important to know what's in our skies and all this kind of thing. That's the organizational piece around these shootdowns. What do you think of that?
Well, it's like that document I did. The acronym proliferation is ridiculous. It's like a juggler. You're juggling all these balls, but you keep adding these balls in. It's the old DC runaround. But they're adding more balls. Rubio, Gillibrand, and everybody, they're all, Gary Nolan, they're all got these balls going in the air. And eventually there's going to be too many balls to juggle, and it's all going to come crashing down.
Mm-hmm.
That's an easy explanation of it. They're trying to confuse the public, with a shell game. It's not a shell game with 3 shells, but with like 1,000, maybe, and 1 ball. And it's like, no, here, no, there, and I even wrote notes. I wrote myself some notes on all this stuff. On Rubio's website, allow me to read this.
Yeah.
He wrote, in accordance, AARO is tasked with focusing the Department of Defense, DoD, on resolving unidentified and aerial phenomena, UAP sightings, improving data sharing between DoD and the intelligence community on UAP sightings. Well, that's been since 1945 or before that. Addressing national security concerns and reporting health effects people may experience in relation to UAP events.
Wow.
Health effects? Now, let's speculate, because I think that's a key. I highlighted 2 things on his little press release. He's got jets, fighter jets behind the press release.
Yeah, that's the other. You pointed out the visuals. You're like, come on.
Yeah, the visuals are there. We're on it, folks. Don't you worry. We're going to shoot those bastards down. So, health effects. Okay. My imagination goes wild. That is the next operation. Let's just say the Tic Tac one, where they fly 1,000 Tic Tacs around the United States and Canada and the Yukon. I don't know why the Yukon, but they want to. And suddenly people start getting sick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that gives me great pause, because now are they combining it with another sort of pandemic-like operation?
Oh, right.
I hope not. But this is something that would really scare the bejesus out of everybody. Are they dropping gas? Are they dropping, some sort of electronic weapon that we don't know about? Are we getting Havana syndrome? Unbelievable. The other thing it could be is a psychological. Rubio's talking about a psychological effect. And that could come from just seeing the craft, or, I don't think it would freak most people out now. They see stuff in the sky 1 million times a year. in the United States, no big deal. So I thought that was very interesting in his press release. There was one other thing. Here we go. This is interesting. He writes, he's writing to Congress, and he says, Arrow's success will depend on robust funding for its activities and cooperation between the Department of Defense and the intelligence community. As such, we respectfully request your assistance, Congress, in securing the necessary funding and organizational support for Arrow's success and longevity. Okay. To me, this is suggesting, perhaps strongly suggesting, that these factions of the deep state, they've created more factions, and they're starting to splinter up. In other words, the balloon was a stunt by one faction to send a message to another faction. And it's like, maybe these illegal funding streams that Catherine Austin Fitts and others write about, maybe the access to those is being fractured as well. Because Rubio's got his hand out here for Arrow and UAP Task Force. Robust funding. Why do they need funding if, they have unlimited funding streams and access to trillions? I wonder, it's a possibility that this might show that there's continuing, fracturization of the deep state going on behind the scenes. Just thought I'd throw that out there. I thought that was
very interesting. Yeah. Rubio's presence in the middle of it is also highly suspect, along with Gillibrand, who is, after all, a Democrat. And here they are arm in arm. She's up to her neck in all of these aerospace connections. Rubio's there on the Space Coast. He's a neocon. He wants to bomb Iran and anything else that he can get his hands on. When you look at these types of people being involved, they like the idea, hey, we'll set up a UFO defense. This will be the ultimate piece, for bringing the institutions in and along with the UFO threat. And they have the technology to project it. They have the technology to run it as if it were actually happening, or raise that in the public consciousness if they couldn't pull it off worldwide.
Well, let's do some more speculation. Were the balloons, maybe one of them was real. Were the others? They have holographic technology, voice of God, everything that can project this stuff. I think we need to come to terms with that. People I talk to are like, that's been a reality for 25 years. All we're shown is B-roll of fighter jets. That's stock footage, as you and I know. And say, an F-22 shut down, they could say a mothership over Canada and it crashed into a lake and it's gone. How are we supposed to know that the footage is real? And it's not. It's just like the Ukraine war. They brought out the stock footage of Soviet maneuvers. That's a possibility too. Yeah. That it's just trumped up even worse. Okay. The press was immediately in cahoots, Tucker Carlson, others.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, CIA all the way right there. It's this fracturing of deep state groups, factions. It's like a petri dish. And I discussed this with my wife the other day, and they keep splitting and more acronyms, more departments, more obfuscation, more. But the petri dish is the same size as the bacteria, splitting, and they're going to run out of room.
Interesting.
It's like the juggling. Just think of juggling, but you can only juggle so many balls, and they're really putting a lot of balls in the air. I mean, the acronym, the departments, it's ridiculous. And of course, they're only reporting what they've already had for 30, 40, 50 years. Well, you don't think we've had a UFO defense grid up, for at least 30, 40 years? Oh, I'd bet a farm on it. Like I said, I think they know exactly who's coming and going. Like two O&I guys were bragging about that. I don't know why they said we're allowed to talk about that. I think they're allowed to talk about it because it's just out of most people's reality. They can't wrap their heads around the UFO phenomenon, let alone, we have a defensive system for it. and that we have a triage system. You're allowed in, you're not, for whatever reason. And probably most of the benevolent ones are like, no way, stop, giant, no, unless you have something to offer wise. You guys, I don't care about your mangoes and tulips, orchids. There's a lot of people sin, from Alpha Centauri or something, but but this whole operation, Chris Mellon and the UAP task force, and they all look like more and more like heroes. See, one guy wrote to me today and said, "Oh no, Biden is a hero, and so is your cousin." I don't think so. Huh. Because Chris Mellon and Gary Nolan and all these people, they're offering marshmallow soft disclosure. They're kind of talking about the phenomenon. Kind of. He and Elizondo did that dog and pony show on the History Channel, whatever it was. And they were like, gosh, we're going to get to the bottom of this mystery. And so, but once you start adding fighter jets shooting down, some headline said fighter shoots down UFO.
Right.
You're getting into an area where they did that in the 50s. I think the Truman had a shoot down order. Probably LeMay did too, I think, is what I remember from books past. He's like, I posted something about a guy found an article. He's not even a UFO guy. He's a military historian. And he said, hey, B-29 crowd, here's all the, Foo Fighter reports from over Japan in World War II. I posted it on Twitter. It's a video. And I'm like, yes, go. And he's like, I don't know what these were, but these fireballs were doing all these dancing around. But you better believe LeMay, who was in charge of that, the B-29 operation over Japan, he probably had, some fireball comes near you. Yes, that might be a Japanese weapon. It wasn't the rocket plane. It wasn't the jet plane. They had very few of those, and they didn't work. And they ran out of fuel. These things were following the bomber squadrons for hours and doing maneuvers around the planes. You better believe LeMay had a shoot down order. And I'm sure the guys, the 50 calibers are trying to bring these things down. And this guy's video said they shot some of them down, which I think is probably a U.S. Army Air Corps disinformation at the time. None of the European ones were ever shot down to my knowledge. How do you shoot down a plasma ball? I don't know.
I think that they were trying to chase them and couldn't. This is the nature of the problem that they had. The shoot down order is interesting because of that idea that they wouldn't risk interplanetary war, so therefore they knew what they were shooting at. That's an interesting plays. Who was operating those vehicles if it wasn't an off-world civilization?
Right, and there is the possibility of something else. You never know with the Germans, but my thinking goes towards we've had ET advisors as well as the Germans did in World War II. I'm pretty convinced of that. There's no hard proof or anything, but it makes sense. In Carl Jung and my grandfather and the OSS, boy, they needed mystics and people to figure this out because they were the only people at the time who truly understood things like Atlantis and Blavatsky and everything like that. And it's like, well, Atlantis was this galactic civilization. People were coming and going all the time, and Vimanas and other things. They understood that. Whereas all we had was Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. American people, God, Martian, and it's like, well, Mars, forget it. But the ET allies probably have advised us for 75 years and saying, these guys are okay. Be careful of these guys, though. And so that's been going on forever. And I'm not saying it's all negative in the military-industrial complex. I think there's a mixture of positive and negative and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way it is, But there's discernment, like the law of discernment. It is like you need to, hey, American military, we're from, whatever galaxy. You need to understand who is coming into your airspace and what they're all about and what they're doing. Other than the botanists in the Amazon doing their thing, that's fine. But, these other guys, they've got agendas. And so fast forward 75 years to say, oh, it's a mystery and we don't know anything. That's a complete lie. The American military is not stupid. They're very proficient. And in the black programs, they know. And I go back to, the biggest group of people who are going to be angry are the military. Not the 10% in the black programs and on the UFO file, the MJ-12 folks. Not them. The rest of the military who've been bamboozled and sworn to secrecy, with violent threats. They're really. I'll bet you that I've heard from my military people. They're very angry. And you're not. Yes, they'll do their duty and they're patriotic and they'll keep their mouths shut. But at a certain point, when you're shooting at things and the media is lying and everything, and they're saying, well, the Navy did this, and the Air Force did this, and the Space Force did this, I think there's going to be a tipping point where the military folks will be like, enough. Mm-hmm. And some general officer is going to lead a group of people and say, we are not on board with this operation, like the UAP Task Force and Arrow. They are separate entities from us. Yes, they're in the Pentagon, playing paper football and drinking beer, but they have an office, but no website. They still don't have websites.
Right.
No information. The Pentagon just releases press releases.
Right.
Oh, Arrow did this. They had archery competition with balloons. It's ridiculous to think that this balloon thing makes the Pentagon and the military look kind of stupid too. But they weren't happy. Air Force shooting $1 million missiles.
Your dad, who was in charge of the Navy and was a senator for many years, deep inside of this structure, what would he have thought of some of these things that are happening with the balloon, the shoot downs, and the UAP UFO dance?
Well, I think privately between me and him, he would think it was kind of a ridiculous stunt, but publicly he would have stuck to his status quo. He was an acolyte of with Cheney and Rumsfeld and Bush and some other neocons. He was more moderate, but on military matters, my dad was very, very conservative. I won't say neocon, but others can say, he's a neocon. And so I think he would have towed the line strictly on that.
Right.
It's a test of the emergency UFO broadcast system. Your cell phone lights up. But it is prepping us for some type of narrative in the future where it's like ET UFO bad and missiles good, direct energy weapons, satellites good, and maybe China isn't our enemy, or China is in cahoots with those bad, ETs, those regressive ETs. They'll spin it a million different ways, and every way is janky because they never ever want us to know the real truth. We can discuss what's real and what's not, but what the dirty laundry is of the military-industrial complex. But the funding streams and illegal weapons and all the other things, they don't want that to come out. And they'll continue doing these stupid operations to distract us from the genuine crimes that 10% of the military have done, and the 90% will be stained with. That to me breaks my heart because I really enjoy the military. I've grown up with it, and it's I bet you there's a lot of pissed off people in the military who won't say a thing, but boy, they're starting to boil over like a pot of lobsters, with this crap. And my Navy guy says, he knows a lot of people who don't care for my cousin Chris Mellon, but because of national security protocols, mum's the word. So it's a Mexican standoff in a sense, but 10 years, 15 years, Daniel, I think we're going to start to see major cracks in this system of deep state secrecy, which is poisoning the nation and the world. Well,
we've been so far behind that wall of secrecy that there's such a disconnect between the average public and the things that they know deep inside that structure, that whole X-Protect kind of piece of that structure. My question on this, though, it's kind of interesting. If you think of someone like your cousin Chris, who's been deep involved with this, and my guess is that he follows your work very closely because, just to keep check marks on everything. If you felt like you had his ear right now and he was listening, and you could comment here on the things that they've done with the UFO threat, the UAP task force, the whole buildup of this thing, the creation of Arrow, Rubio and Gillibrand, this whole thing with Elizondo. What would you say to him, to clear the air and to bring transparency in the whole thing?
I don't think I'd say anything to him at this juncture. I wrote a letter to him years ago, point blank, saying, you're going to be a fall guy in this eventually, whether you and I are alive or dead, but you'll stain the family with this. And, I know certain members of the Mellon family are not happy with my revelations on Paul Mellon and the OSS and things like that, but it's going to come out anyway. So you might as well hear it for someone in the family. I don't think there's anything I could say to him to change his mind. I think if I had to put my head into his, he's firmly on board with this has to remain secret. We need to control the narrative, with iron shackles. And the American people and the people of the world, by and large, are not worthy or intelligent enough to understand or accept any of this. And maybe that's for the best. And that's what he would probably be thinking. I think he views me as just a loose cannon, and obviously UFO Twitter, 90% is pro UAP task force, Gary Nolan, Tucker.
There's a lot of bots in there.
Everybody, all semi-ban and Hal Puthoff, these guys, and they're like, oh, these guys are heroes. They're really going to give us disclosure.
Unbelievable.
And so, as I said before,
ridiculous.
Yeah. But I mean, where are my conspiracy theorists? And it's
right.
It's very little, and it's sad because I understand people who are hardwired to believe authority, and they are authority figures in a sense. They're not. It's just the disclosure movement. I'd rather listen to the teenage girl selling crystals and going, "Hey, our vibration's rising." And I'd rather listen to her than any of those people on anything, because at least she's telling a little bit of the truth of the universe.
Yeah.
These guys are like, they're well paid. Nolan and who's the other guy? The physicist, rocket scientist. The redneck rockets guy. Who I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
These people are getting paid. They're getting exposure. They're on board with the new thing. Ross Coulthard, reporters on the scene. Your average 12-year-old knows more about UFOs than he does. Seriously, and they're all part of this dog and pony show operation that they're doubling down. The very definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Mm-hmm. Now, you could project that onto the disclosure movement, and you guys are doing your videos and your books, and nothing's ever getting done. Okay, fair enough. But those guys, boy, they're sticking to, tried and true, boring narratives. And gosh, maybe we should dust off Project Blue Book, and, we'll call it Purple Book, and Gary Nolan can do the physics, and it's like
he's too busy high-fiving Dr. Fauci.
Yeah, applying astronomy and medicine and physics to the UFO phenomena, the ET phenomena. We're dealing with the 12 dimensions of the universe. The physics change every time you leave the atmosphere of the Earth. Every dimension and layer of dimension has a different set of physics. I mean, metaphysics is all powerful. Consciousness is all powerful. And these guys are using stones and sticks to figure this out. And that's by design. Here's the latest intel. UFO turned green, purple, and white and zigzag. And, Gary Nolan's looking at it. Well, maybe they had, some spotlight filters, the gel, the colored lights on there and projecting. I mean, they don't have the best minds on this.
Yeah.
The best minds working for the black programs. And there's a few scattered among the disclosure movement, probably in silence. You get crackpots like me, Farrell, and some others, taking a stab at it. But, the real people who are behind the scenes, they're afraid. I talked to a physicist the other day who contacted me, and wow, this person was really smart. And then they started talking about angels and how it's all, in our minds, and the physics don't add up. And I'm like, yeah, the physics don't add up because we're using linear 20th century physics instead of nonlinear 21st century physics. I mean, you can't get people to move past hardly to move past the sticks and stones as tools.
Right.
And it's like, oh, Nolan's so smart with all his patents. What, a quantum holographic bottle opener? What other patents does he have? I don't give a shit.
Robot butler. Come on.
Yeah, look, a robot. I got it made in Japan. What? Is that one of those sex robots? Wait a minute. And there's all kinds of. I monitor the world, and it's like Japan is really scary to me because it's going into a technocratic. There's a lost generation who never got into the corporate workforce, and they stopped having marital relations and sex, and they're marrying robots and having tea parties out in the park with a latex. I mean, this is endemic of sickness of the world society.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, what does that have to do with the UFO? And it's like everything's connected.
Sure.
Japan is spiraling down. And America is in a sense too, and it's because our leadership is all deep state controlled. One guy said 150 men rule the world. I'm like, maybe a woman or two, but yeah, probably. In a couple of round tables, they probably don't all get along, but yeah. We could name names all day long. It doesn't matter, but it's obvious. And Chris Mellon has just taken his marching orders from somebody above him. He doesn't strike me as somebody really high up the food chain. Yes, the Mellon family, we're part of the Committee of 300, and some people have us in the pyramid as above the military. And
do you think he's inherited that access?
Oh yeah, I think he's inherited from my grandfather and maybe some other Mellons like Scaife, and there's a few others that were in the intel, side of things. He's inherited that, and I guess I've inherited, my whole side of the family. We're considered the black sheep of the Mellon family. Yes. It's because we're free thinkers, and my cousins are hippies, and now I'm a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, well, okay, that's fine with me, but it's obvious that he has taken up the mantle, and frankly, it's very strange to me because in this day and age, with everyone shooting their mouths off the internet, it's not like 40 years ago when my grandfather was still alive, where nobody knew the Mellon name at all, hardly, unless you were on the East Coast and stood the social register.
Exactly.
The National Gallery of Art and saw Andrew Mellon and Paul Mellon, who are they? Well, now Chris came out and the Mellon family spread all over the damn airwaves. And, but that was an impetus to me because I thought, well, maybe I'll just go out there and make a fool of myself, but at least I'm going to talk to the other side of the narrative because I don't believe they're doing is right. It's not. It's just more secrecy, more confusion, and clouding the waters with more mud. Acronyms.
No. I think it's made a huge difference.
Yeah. It's mud.
No question about it. There's a couple of questions, though. What level of access do you think that Chris Mellon has on the UFO file side? What have they given him access to put him out there as one of the frontmen?
Yeah, I've talked to my cousin and my wife. She's ex-CIA, and I did talk to my dad about it before he died, and we all kind of jawboned around the kitchen table around it. What does Chris know and what he doesn't? He certainly was a liaison when my dad was on the intel committee, the magic. He was involved in that. So he definitely privy to a good portion of the UFO file, probably the same portion my dad had, which was, maybe an inch, whereas the real file is, 30 feet tall.
Right. It's substantial.
My wife and cousin think he's higher up than I do. But I don't know. It's hard because even in person, when I was talking to him, I said, man, let me help you. He would not go off script with me. I said, come on, family. No, I won't tell anybody. And I wouldn't have. I don't talk about the portions of our conversation that were private. I talk about the things that surrounding it. But it's like, I don't know. He could be managed, compartmentalized. I think he's compartmentalized for sure, but to what degree, I don't know.
Interesting. He seems to me in the background as quite a major architect, but it's on this level. I almost call it like on the Rubio level. Here's somebody who, is in the background and they're saying, put this forward. And it is interesting, though, I think possibly that inheritance, and I'm glad you answered that question, because he may have something a little extra than like a Gillibrand or a Rubio because of that inheritance factor of the name itself. And they know there's a long-standing history there with your grandfather and everything else.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Rubio and Gillibrand are given the quarter inch.
Yeah.
Chris probably has 2 or 3 inches of the UFO file, or more, maybe a foot stack. That's for sure, because the intel business, and this goes back to the Nazi SS, because that's the forerunner of CIA and the NSA and all these organizations, because they were a fiefdom, financially independent fiefdom in the German hierarchy, and the most powerful one. I mean, even I wrote it in my new book. General von Manstein, he has to succumb, even though Hans Kammler is a lower rank than him. Manstein's a field marshal. He's got, on certain matters, the SS takes precedence. And so when you're in the nebulous world of the intel agencies, and, Chris is probably a member of several roundtables we don't know the acronyms for.
Mm-hmm.
And that puts him well above Congress and president on certain things. And so he may indeed, I think he is playing dumb to a degree. He has to, because the mission statement is, my God, put the as much toothpaste back in the tube as you can with these, operations. And they probably got a schedule. All right, balloons, number one. First was the pandemic. I guess you could weave that into that operation maybe. But this balloon thing, and then the 2017, Nimitz was number one. Mm-hmm. And then this balloon thing is probably number two. It's a poor number two, but it's a number two operation. Now the media's died down. Everyone's forgot about it. Most people. But they're testing the waters, and they're testing compliance. And if you raise the tolerance the American people have, forget about the world, but just the American people, if you raise that UFO tolerance when they do a bigger event, let's say number 3 event is going to preempt. Let's say, the ETs of the world, positive ETs, are in cahoots with a faction of the deep state and says, let's do a light show around the world. Let's do it. Get everybody out there flashing their lights, Las Vegas, on fire, and then Rubio and the task force comes out and says, well, that's us. That's all of our stuff. Don't worry about it. And people may see aerial battles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not uncommon throughout history. There's been sightings of, where there's been aerial battles. And I'm sure that's true. And so you're upping the tolerance of the American people. And when you get to a certain tolerance, then you can tell them anything, because, now they're fearful.
Right.
And some of that is warranted. I mean, we do have enemies. It's logical to assume we do have lots of enemies, either in the solar system or out in the galaxy, because of our alliances with bad actors. And so it's your imagination goes wild, but they're up in the game in a sense. Yes, it's silly balloons and everything, but the way they bandied about those key words, object, UAP, shoot down, UFO. And then of course, some people use the alien word.
It's laying down a pattern in our unconscious to accept the idea of shooting down objects that are identified as UFOs.
They're kind of going back to the 1950s in a sense. Project Mogul and weather balloons and dummies and, what's next, more of that shit. But they're also twisting it in a modern sense because the media is so voracious now. It instantly on your iPhone,
Right.
At 5 in the morning. In the 1950s, you'd have to wait and go and buy the paper with your milk or whatever. And there was a lag time
Yeah.
until the internet, and now there's no lag time. So whenever they do something, it's instantaneous around the world, and that's a powerful tool. I'm sure the intel is,
What about this idea that, let's say, I think it's very interesting, the scenario you laid out there with like Rubio and the idea that they would do a light show and he would say it's our stuff. What if they're pulling at some point a UFO threat? And we've seen, I would say that this is even a dry run that they've done here in the past couple of weeks, small scale but significant nonetheless, including the Van Herk presence. But what if they do that and in the middle of it the real thing shows up?
Well, the confusion would be tenfold, hundredfold. Number one, I would be relieved in some ways because it ends the argument. I mean, I still have psychology people going, "Oh no, this is Carl Jung, collective unconscious. It's all in your mind. This is phenomenon." It's like, no, he had a point, but he was also OSS, which means after the war he was CIA. Carl Jung was on the payroll, and so I have some problems with the psychology portion of this. I think psychology has been a poor science. They don't understand consciousness and universal consciousness of the pineal gland very well, at least not in the West. But to your question, if there is a big aerial battle in the sky, it shoots many ducks at the same time, because then the argument's over. There is still an argument over, are we fighting the Chinese and the Russians in the sky, or is ET in that mix? And it may turn out that it's all three: China, Russia, us, all four, and ET in the mix, which is probably more likely now. See, in von Braun's time, he was talking about doing the fake thing, and yes, using holographics, voice of God, and that's in play too. It's going to be the biggest shit show you've ever seen if they do that. But then no one is going to win that. That's going to come down on everyone, because I'll say it a million times until I die. It's like we are all in this together. Yes, it's us versus them, and deep state, and I don't cotton to them and all that stuff. We're all in this together, and I believe in the law of one. We're all one in the cosmos. So this is an illusion, the separation and the infighting, and those are our enemies. That's all an illusion. Somebody's getting a profit off of all that war, and so it's going to level the playing field if that happens. And I think the human race collectively can move on and evolve from there. And I don't think that's particularly anyone's first choice. If I'm thinking about different factions, light gray hats with some ETs, black gray hats with ETs, Russians, Chinese, whoever else, the Five Eye nations, everyone's in the mix. I don't think that's anyone's first choice. I think it's going to be the last choice for everyone doing something like that, because it's going to be a huge mess, and we could sustain vast casualties. I don't want to scare anyone, but we do have to look at this very seriously. That we have very powerful weapons, as Farrell says, that make the hydrogen bomb look like fireworks.
Right.
No, I mean, we possess very little wisdom, apparently, because we've kept all this stuff secret, and that's not wise. And so another General LeMay, I'm not going to say, Van Herk's going to do it, but some hawk may say, screw it, we're fighting a war, let's use all the weapons. And they crank out some doomsday thing, and they take a chunk out of the earth. A huge chunk, like the size of the Caribbean. It's just debris out into space. That could be an extinction level event.
That danger exists, yeah.
Yeah. Psychopaths, from what little I know of psychology, psychopaths are very smart. There's an intelligence component to them. And if the Nazi SS High Command is you can be very, you could love your wife and children on the weekend and then go, murder people in the death camps. They have that ability to compartmentalize. There's no ethics, there's no humanity among it. It's all gone. And so that's hard for most people to wrap their heads around. I've got an imagination where I can get into Calmer's mind. He's loving his wife and children. He says so in my book. And then he goes and he shoots prisoners for no reason at all. They're clogging the hallways of a tunnel complex. It's bizarre, but these psychopathic people, whether they've been manipulated, probably most of them have somehow. By whom, how, that's up for debate. But, they're smart, but they're mad. And so if I'm a general and I'm not getting promoted, or, no one wants to rally behind me, I could see, NORCOM or something in command just picking up the phone and saying, all right, launch the hypersonic missiles with, some type of 0-point devastation warhead, and bye-bye South America, or something like that. And then slowly, the shock waves and other things around the earth, would destroy not all life, nothing underground maybe, but all surface life. And that probably appeals to certain small groups of people. Maybe, 50 million people would survive. That's plenty, and then we'll rule the earth. And then, their friends can come and repopulate the earth. I mean, it won't be too different from some of the sci-fi movies.
Well, that's very interesting, actually. With all that in mind, and it is quite a scenario, when you see the signature and the fingerprints of the fact that General Van Herk, for example, comes out of the 509th, which is Jesse Marcel's bomb squadron that recovered the Roswell wreckage. It's generational, next generation. Then we find that Chance Saltzman, the Space Force commander who's in charge of the entire Space Force, that he comes out of Malmstrom Air Force Base, where they had the huge nuclear silo shut down by a UFO in 1967. Those signatures of those two, they both have a major UFO fingerprint on them.
Yeah. I pray to the universe that they shut the big nukes down, but they've got other weapons now that far surpass nukes. I think when they talk a big game about nukes, they're really referring to, modern day Wunderwaffe weapons that are American. Sky's the limit. I mean, look what they publicly tell you about the LRAD sound system. They can burst your head, from a mile away. I mean, but this gets to something I was thinking of. This may or may not be related, but I'm going to throw it out here. I've been to Maelstrom Air Force Base when I was young. My dad and I, in 1989, we flew to Montana. I've been there, Montana, twice or three times. Beautiful state and wonderful people. But we went to some billionaire's ranch. And I think I've told this story before, but in relation to your Montana and connections, I thought maybe there's something weird going on there, because Montana is as people know, it's the Wild West still. We went to this grouping with senators and congressmen to this billionaire's house, and there were other billionaires there. I can't tell you the names, and even if my dad's alive, I'm not sure I would throw the names out there. But they, we did hunting and pheasants and things like that. And then they had the big dinner, and my dad said, "Listen, you're not going to like this, but I want you to listen." I thought, what the hell's going on? And they were talking about how few black people were in the state of Montana and how we should get rid of, really racist neo-Nazi stuff coming from people that I could not believe were in agreement and nodding. And my dad was just like, I don't know. But there were other senators and congressmen who were like, hell yeah, we should pass these laws to subjugate, and and not just that, but we should tax more and up the military. And this was a neocon right-wing meeting, bar none.
About what year would you say?
89.
Okay.
And we flew into Bozeman, Montana on this guy's private jet. I think it was Senator from Wyoming at the time, but others. And I was shocked as a young man. I was 27. And I was shocked. And my dad's like, you need to grow up, and this is how the world is run. Now, the Montana connection, I went to another ranch later on with a friend in Montana near the park. Same thing again. A lot of big wig billionaire people. His father was a billionaire and a banker. And same kind of few people, not as many, but there were men and women in this one. So you had to monitor the conversation very closely. And I started thinking, when you were mentioning Montana, it's just like, boy, I think a lot of these deep state billionaires have like a presence in Montana because it's the Wild West.
Yeah.
And I remember going to Malmstrom Air Force Base with Dad on one of our trips, and this is back in the 70s or something. But you're right. There's something going on in Montana, and I don't know exactly what it is, but I thought I'd throw that out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very interesting.
It was weird and disturbing. And
it is.
I didn't enjoy either trip. I really didn't. Very strange. And I think my dad was kind of like, you need to grow up, boy. And I really was a boy at 27. I really was. I was kind of naive. Yeah, Montana, very conservative. Very
Incredible.
conservative. You're in good company of neocon billionaire.
Well, we have
my
the
uncle
balloon.
lives in Wyoming. It's just kind of the same flavor.
Right.
He's the
you got the chain.
Yeah. Tim, my uncle, lives out in Wyoming.
Oh, really? That's
yeah.
And like you said, beautiful place.
Another deep state billionaire. He owns Pan Am Systems Railroad. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, I mean, he is very interesting. Yeah, I've looked into him. He's a very interesting guy.
Oh, yeah. Very interesting. And he is a neocon.
Yeah. A lot of government contracts.
He never got along with my mom. He got along with my dad really well.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Tim, yeah. Yeah, I don't mind him doing his patriotic duty if he's hauling goods for the military and the intel services. That's fine. I don't care. But I have a feeling, he's quadrupled his fortune. Anyone who does that, I mean, it's easier when you start out with $1 billion, but.
When's the last time you talked to him?
Years. I see him at funerals. He's not close with my family. He doesn't like my mother or my sisters. I don't know what he thinks of me. I don't really care. He's
unbelievable.
Getting close to 80 himself. So,
well, your mom had a very much a kind of she almost had an ex-share mentality where she wanted to move the culture forward, and it sounds like she had a great awareness around a lot of these subjects.
She did, and she still does, although she's older now. She was, more of a free-thinking hippie from the 70s, and so her bent was, don't trust the government. They're lying about marijuana, but she's very, very intelligent, and she's well-read. I mean, she's read probably 5 times as many books as I have. She really has.
Incredible.
I don't have the patience, but I try, and so she played a lesser part in that. She was never really vocal or did anything about it, but she would mistakenly give money to charities in hopes of progressive change. And I try to tell her that most charities are corrupt. Graham Hancock wrote that wonderful book in the 90s about it, Big Foundations.
Mm-hmm.
But she's kind of lost that. But she did get me started on the road,
How does she feel about the state of the world now?
Shit show. I mean, but she's kind of isolated. She reads and watches the news and a lot, and I say, don't watch the news, and she goes, yeah, I know it's lies, but got to keep tabs on the bastards, see what they're up to. Like,
when you yeah, fantastic. The Montana part, I'm glad you mentioned this story because we have Malmstrom there, we have the balloon coming in. Then we have, after the stories die down, all of these sightings, and I mean, even being covered by news stations in Montana and all over Twitter of what look like more and more shoot downs of weird objects. So we're in a weird place when it comes to Montana. And then there's the Casey prediction about Livingston, Montana feeding the world.
That was really odd. I've looked up Livingston. It's not far from Bozeman, so I know the area. And I want to make it clear, because you got to do this in this day and age. I mean, I love Montana, and I think the people are great. I'm talking about the deep state billionaire types, not the regular Montanans. I want to be clear. I love country folk, and they're the salt of the earth. And if they knew the truth, they'd be really disappointed. You'd have a lot of angry cowboys with assault weapons on horseback.
Hey, listen, we've got the deep state in our backyard here in Harvard, so
Yeah, they're everywhere. Well, I'm in D.C. Oh my God, I'm literally in the swamp. There's swamp creatures, walking around everywhere. It's that Roy Cohn. It looks just like him. Maybe they age regressed him. Clone him.
Swamp zombie, swamp clone.
Yeah. No, my God, I'm in the middle of it. Because I told my wife, I think I want to move to Switzerland. She's like, no, you got to stay in the heart of it. I was like, yeah, you're right. But
she's a great coach.
That part of the United States, the West, but that Northwest, that's big sky country. So number one, simple, you have 360-degree view most of the time with the mountains and things. You have stories of anytime you have a mountain range, which is a lot of telluric energy, ley line energy going on, in mountain range, a lot of stone, this piezoelectric, that may attract ET for a variety of natural and other reasons. There's a lot of stories about underground bases being in mountains, which, of course, the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia out here, where my farm is, they got Mount Weather, and I've heard that a lot of those mountains are hollowed out. They tell you about Raven Rock. They tell you about Mount Weather. They tell you like 5 of them, but really we know there's probably 200. I believe that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it would make sense to me that if you want to have a secure base, that's weapons and other things, why not hollow out a solid rock mountain, underneath? And I bet ET's been doing that for millions of years. And we were like, oh, what a great idea. Now that we have Hans Kammler, it's 1947, he can lead our teams with a lot of rebar and concrete and tunnel boring machines. Somebody told me the Germans were working on a big tunnel boring machine in the vein of the ones we have now. Not quite as big. I'm trying to get some information on that, and it's almost impossible. But it would stand to reason that all those tunnels, there's thousands of kilometers of tunnels in Germany and Czechoslovakia and Poland and Austria. Holy cow. Yeah. They might have had some type of, probably working on a diesel, but some type of boring machine. I can't really wrap my mind around all those prisoners digging them by hand. Maybe I'm wrong, but
yeah.
But going back to the West and Montana, that's always been, it's clear sky. Here in the summer on the East Coast, it's so hazy. You have a dozen UFOs flying over, you've never seen them. It's just so hazy. But out there, it's clear as a bell. And so there's a lot of sightings.
It's a really great point, actually, when you think about it. Yeah. There's a guy who's been floating around the UFO field for a number of years named Charles Hall. Talks about the tall whites and how he encountered them when he was on these various kind of low-level duties in the Army in the late 60s. Now, he said that they've been coming there. One of the things that grabbed me, because I'm always thinking about this Cosmos Club and how it got developed, is that he thinks that they've been here for quite a long time, but specifically, there was a reference that one of them had been in that area since the time of Washington.
Yeah.
So, when we think about the foundational piece, we got the UFO explosion in 1947, but we got the Cosmos Club in the 1870s, and it was founded, by a guy who'd been stationed in Cape Girardeau, and that would become the site of a major UFO event. How far back in America do you think this UFO, and let's say the technology transmission has been going on?
I'm of the mind that ET has been coming, thousands and thousands of different races and species forever, millions and millions of years, maybe billions of years. We're recent newcomers, 500,000 years old. I think there's something to the Anunnaki story about our creation. I think the various DNA in our systems, our vast diversity shows is a good indicator that our DNA was added onto by different people. Hey, let's add the crazy gene, John Warner. So it's been going on forever. The medieval paintings. Come on, the the stories in the religious texts of Ezekiel's wheel. I mean, I think it's obvious because they've hidden so much of our history from us. How did they move the giant stones around the world? I mean, come on. I mean, so George Washington, the story of the angel at Valley Forge, who showed him the new America, the new Atlantis.
Yeah.
Gee whiz, angels, anything with wings, cherubs, angels, demons, that's ET in my book. So I don't think it's that big a deal. Time, we have this linear time thing, like, oh, that was so long ago. How could that be? And it's like, time is just, we have a distorted view of time. Out there in space, it's all circular and happening all at once. You can time travel. It's very tricky business, time travel. Different realities, manipulating timelines, splintering timelines. And so but it's like, it's not a big deal. I mean, chariots of the gods.
Right.
That started it all. And in the modern era. And of course, Blavatsky and Steiner were wink, wink. Hey, we're talking about, Ahriman and other things. They were winking and nodding, trying to get their acolytes to understand, oh, angels and demons. Oh, got it. And so I don't think that's a big deal. I read Charles Hall's book. I think it's very intriguing. Certainly if they disguised the tall whites in clothes and sunglasses and they walked around in Vegas having dinner, I've lived in Vegas for 6 months. No one would notice. Vegas, everyone looks like an alien in Vegas. I mean, it's a guy with a top hat, 10 feet tall, and people looking like.
Do you
Elvis.
think that they were using? Since you've read the books, do you think that they were using Hall as a kind of a psychological experiment? Like, what would an average person do thrust into all these aliens just to hang around?
It's always a possibility. It's always a possibility. But I tend to err on the side that the book is truthful. I've heard from other sources that I trust that the tall whites are blue collar Anunnaki.
Interesting.
They're very tall, okay, and the legends are the Anunnaki were very tall, and but this is a lesser caste. Remember, the caste system comes from the Anunnaki, as Farrell said, our caste systems, and so these are blue collar worker Anunnaki that were somehow there was a kerfuffle out there somewhere. And they were like, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And either a faction left or they were all kicked out or something. I don't know. But they came here and they've been nosing around, doing this and that. And Charles Hall said the Air Force has been giving them asylum since, I don't know, World War II. It's called the Holiday Inn. I think the S3 or Indian Springs. There's a cavern there, and they're given. I've been told they've asked for more real estate around that area. S3 expanding towards Pahrump, Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense to me. I think it's real. I don't think it's that big a deal. ETs walk among us. I think they've kept it secret. They could probably pass you in the street as a very tall person, with pale skin. Certainly in Vegas, no one would notice. No one. There's a lot of freewheeling people around there. I mean, I like Vegas. It was fun to live there. And there's a lot of strange things. I mean, I would imagine there'd be more than one race of ETs walking around the casinos having fun. And of course, the restaurants are great. So I don't think it's that big a deal. I think Charles Hall describes them as very condescending and kind of brutal towards humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The Air Force doesn't like them, but the word is they had a trickle down of technology, which he describes in his book a long time ago, the Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
They look like a white cylinder, and they said this is what the Anunnaki used to travel around the solar system, visiting relatives on this moon or another, and I found that very interesting that all of a sudden they've disclosed a craft that looks like a Tic Tac.
Huh. Yes.
Okay. I mean, I don't think this part of it is a psyop. I think this part of it is true. I've also heard a story that there was a Paradise, California, was burned to the ground because the tall whites wanted to come out and live amongst us publicly.
Huh.
That's just a story. But it does add into this other narrative where they want more real estate. They're tired of living in secret. They're threatening the military. We want to live among you. how peaceful and how that would work. I don't know, but they're like, we're tired of being, prisoners of the United States Air Force and the military. We're tired of it. And maybe since our technology has slowly gone up and up and up and up, there's a possibility that we use directed energy weapons from satellite. And there was a band of tall whites walking around. I think the story goes they were walking around a public open air market, and they torched that town and said, "No, you won't. We're now playing hardball with you people. Thanks for the technology, but we're tired of your arrogance, and now we're on parity with you." Because I think the U.S. military has parity with certain ET races. Not all, of course, but a few. And that makes us dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, all the stories I hear of secret space programs and things we're not great people out there. We're jerks, and we're warlike.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's true, it would dovetail into this narrative of the tall whites, Charles Hall, because, monkey see, monkey do it's a terrible thing to say, but human race has learned a lot from star beings. And one of them is we're very good at war and weapons development. Very good. And less good at making friends.
There's something very compelling about Hall's story. And I go back to the Cosmos Club, which, of course, your family was involved with the Cosmos Club.
I just got an invitation to join.
Oh, really? Oh, this is really great. You have to join.
My wife laughed. She's like, "You're going to laugh about this." And it's a friend of hers. Someone that lives in our apartment building.
Wow.
And they're members. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, it's still expensive to join, and I'm not sure I'm going to do that." First of all, I think it's stratified. It's compartmentalized there. Yeah, that's the way I would run it. Hell yeah, I'm not going to have ordinary citizens, where they talk about astronomy and philosophy and theosophy or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. But then there's, on the basement level, they're having an MJ12 type meeting, with the real, it's like the Freemasons, it's the above 33rd degree elite Freemasons that know the truth of the world and the universe. And everyone else is a porch Mason. No offense. I have friends who are Freemasons. There's nothing nefarious about them. But they go from mild to wild, light and dark.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I would join, because I'm not sure it would be fruitful for me to be mixed up with the dark folks.
Yeah.
We're like,
hey,
you got a big mouth, Warner, you got a big mouth for a Mellon. I got that message from me, anonymous email, big mouth for a Mellon.
Yes.
So, I don't think
you've
so.
put a lot on the record already, and especially in relation
like
to
that pissed me off.
Yeah.
You're damn right I'm going to put a lot on the record. Somebody's got to. Everyone else in the family is either ignorant, stupid, or on the take.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No, I think, listen, it wasn't you who put the Mellons on the map with this. It was Chris Mellon, and you kind of came out to push back against some of that. In some corners of the family, I imagine that they're happy that you did that, because they don't want to be wrapped up with this. Yeah.
I don't know many outside. I have one cousin that I talk to, but I don't know many outside my side of the family who are ignorant of everything. I think most of the Mellons are like Committee of 300 Families Everywhere. They're mostly ignorant of this information, the history of the world, and they don't care as long as they get their monthly paychecks. And the few that do, obviously they've not reached out to me. So I would think they're either scared or they're on the program, with the program. So.
Wow. Well, the Cosmos Club as UFO Bilderberg, I think it's very interesting that at this juncture.
I'm not joining that. I mean, what am I supposed to learn? Somebody wants to talk about theosophy and philosophy, and maybe there's an alien on the other side of an alternate universe. I don't want to sit in on lectures like that. That's very narrow thinking. Yeah. ET and religion, let's discuss it and merge it together. It's like, well, it already is, but I don't want to waste my time. And then even if they let me in on a black hat or dark gray hat meeting in the basement, Well, what am I supposed to say to them? I don't believe you're doing the right thing. They'd probably threaten me and say, well, you're part of the Cosmoscope. We're gonna brand you with the deep state brand like a cow.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't see any upside. I'm not paying some exorbitant fee. What's that? That some people are charged. This is what I heard. Some people are charged $400,000 to join.
Oh, well, yeah, that sounds just about right.
And other people like me are charged $40,000. What does that say to you? They're looking for acolytes and people. Some dimwit astronomer, like Neil deGrasse Tyson's. They'll want him to join because he's probably on the CIA payroll, but he's a complete idiot. Doesn't even believe in ET. He's a moron. I think he's damaged astrophysics more than anyone publicly.
Oh yeah, he's just a mouthpiece for that establishment, wanting to keep you in that little fantasy.
No word.
I want to bring this around to the secret organization being involved, and the fact that we had the National Reconnaissance Office involved in our skies, collecting intelligence for decades before we even knew that they existed. So when we talk about a secret space program, well, that kind of monitoring on this level is on the record. Now, the possibility that with what we're seeing here, there's something else involved, bringing out the NORAD COG commander to talk about these things, the UFO shootdowns and all the rest. This group, which I mentioned, just as a side note to handle the name NRO2, a group that's operational on that level that we don't know anything about, but are influencing events in the skies. What do you think about an organization like that? And is that why we're seeing these disconnections, like you were saying, the factionalization? Because, in fact, the public doesn't even know that this group exists.
Well, I think it's a lot of groups that the public doesn't know. You and I don't know exist. But there is somebody behind all that, and call it MJ12-2 or whatever you want to call it. But what they mostly represent is the corporations of America, especially the defense contractors, because I would think that a lot of the big corporations make money off space one way or another. Oh, we want to sell you a weapons platform. Oh, we want to mine moons and asteroids with your fancy gear, but we're going to need help from the Space Force to do that because there's other parties out there who want that gold and rare minerals that we want digging out. And or maybe they want to dig out a moon and build a base up there, which there are rumors of that. It's a great place. Underneath the surface is a great secure operating base. And so the corporations want to keep this secret in perpetuity. This organization behind them, they're going to say, well, Warner and Liszt and everybody else, they're rousing the rabble. We got to do something, not to aggrandize us, but across the board. And the media sometimes screws up and says UFO shootdown. I bet that pisses off some people in the higher up groups, secret groups, because that's, they're like, that idiot Tucker Carlson is going off script.
Mm-hmm.
He's a loose cannon. He's got the brains of an emerging fish species, crawling out of the water.
They're like, let's send him some CIA people to talk about the UFO file, right?
Yeah, I think there is there are groups that represent the corporations who are making money hand over fist, not only from the black budget and the secret budgets, but also from a barter trade system with ET. And that's something we need to concern ourselves with in the narrative going forward, because it's the only thing that really makes sense, because there's only a finite amount of fiat currency and wealth, gold and diamonds around the world. He dug out all the treasure in the Swiss tunnels in Mont Cervin, underneath the hotel there. The economies of the world would probably collapse overnight. Ask Catherine about that. So what is, we have to ask ourselves, what is driving these corporations other than money? And it has to be more and more technology, more and more element 113s or element 115s, things like that, trade goods, which I think has been going on for millions of years. I mean, Atlantis was trading, pineapples for, some type of new crystal, which is probably crystalline minerals and crystals that don't occur on Earth. They're probably highly prized in the black programs. Oh, you want to move transdimensionally through time in this phone booth? Here, just use this purple crystal. Where'd you get that? Never mind where we got it. It's like that has to be part of the equation going forward. It's not this world economy. We're probably part of the galactic economy, which is barter. Money is probably an Earth thing. They probably use it on a few planets. Ha ha ha! Money slavery. It is fiat currency and money is slavery. You're a debt slave, even as a billionaire. Someone's always above Elon Musk, the puppet strings.
Oh yeah.
So got to come to grips with, I believe, is a galactic economy, and it's like, what is furthering these corporations more and more when they expand out in the solar system, mining and doing trade deals? If you're on a moon and building a base, someone's going to come and say, "Hey, how you doing? You want to trade?" It's like, yeah. What do you got? Well, give us, 50, decatons of coffee and chocolate, and a few other items. They're expensive, and we'll give you these crystals, or we'll further improve the temporal matrix in your drive units. Something Star Wars and Star Trek version of things. It makes logical sense. Because if you're a really big corporation, let's say you exist on the moon, you're incorporated on the moon base and not Earth. So you're not beholden to the corporate law on Earth. You're beholden to whatever the law is out in space. There is supposedly some galactic law out there, and it's like, well, we can do this. We'll stretch the law. You can do virtually anything you want within reason, and you're not beholden to taxes or forget. Corporations don't pay taxes now anyway. Imagine in space, they can do anything they want. They probably do anything they want here on Earth, pretty much. A big corporation wants, this small company in Kenya who's, upstart, crush them. That's probably easily done. That's the kind of world we live in. And so, let's expand into space. Business is business. I understand, but it's like, and yes, some of that technology is probably used for national defense, for the survival of the human race.
Mm-hmm.
So, when Chris Mellon and some people say, oh, there's a threat narrative, they are talking of probably 1 or 2% truth. I'm sure there's a lot of ET races out there who are like, get rid of these stupid humans. The Earth is too beautiful and too bountiful with its mineral wealth and its oceans and water. We have a lot of fresh water on the Earth, not just salt water, but fresh water. Water, period. That's a highly valuable thing, in the cosmos. Any astronomer will tell you that most planets are probably desert-like. Mars is pretty dry. It has some water.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
These are logical commodities. I'm just talking about commodities trading. The secret space program is business first. I don't know how big it is, and no one has proof of this, that, and the other, but it makes logical sense that these corporations behind the military industrial complex, they're all doing business out there. And maybe we're doing business with the Russians on Saturn or whatever. But whatever it is, it makes sense, because I think we've moved way beyond the Earth economy, because they know that's going to go towards, I don't know, anyone's guess, a crypto economy. Look at Japan. They pay with everything with cards. There's hardly any cash left, and they're all living in little cubicles at the train station, and they're diddling online 24/7 with no job, and they make pennies off of the work they do online. But they live from micro hotel to micro hotel. Mm-hmm. Japan is very interesting to research. It's kind of a frightening view of the future of the human race in a sense. It's very robotic. Hive mind. I'm not knocking the Japanese. I love their culture, but I love their sushi. But it's like, wait a minute. Latex dolls with AI, and come on. We have some of this technology.
Transhumanist dystopia right there.
Yeah, they're beginning to show us glimpses of that transhumanist Elon Musk type utopia, which is not utopia at all. It's horrific.
John, this has been so great. I just have a couple more questions for you, and I think we're getting into some interesting territory with all this. What I want to do is really get your impression about where they're going with the UFO threat piece, but also through the lens of how far have they come in redeveloping UFO technology, reanimating this from crashes and the technology exchanges that they've had. And also, the third question is, how close of a reality do you think it is that we are working on some level with ET races around the technology question?
As I said, I think logic, to me anyway, logic dictates that we are doing some of that. I think we've got all the technology you can ever imagine now, and it's becoming mature. So I don't think we're working off crash UFOs. The stories that we're turning away, some ET comes with a pickup truck full of junk, and it's like, let's do business. And they're like, no, we don't want any of that junk anymore. We've had it with your hand-me-downs. We want the good stuff. And now we have the things to pay for that. Or we have technology that even you might want, Mr. ET from, Buckwheat with the old Sagittarius arm. I think we're doing. My imagination goes to it. It just seems to make logical sense. We're way beyond the crash retrieval. So sure, we'll investigate. Maybe there's a gizmo or crystal or something we can glean. But it's like, man, we've got to have underground warehouses full of junk UFO parts that we're just like, nah, forget that stuff. We're way beyond that. We want to cobble together something that's 2 miles long, 5 miles long, 100 miles long out in space, near Saturn or somewhere, and build it using all these corporate contractors, using ET contractors.
Mm-hmm.
It's not far-fetched. I think these tall whites are ET contractors. They've showed us how to do a lot of stuff as rent payment for their, they're hiding from somebody. Is a lot of stories purport that. So I think we're way beyond the crash retrieval stage and cobbling together a crude UFO. I think we're in the big corporate. We've been in the big corporate stage of this probably for 30 years, 35 years. And we're dealing with very stable ET races that are like, we'll bring you stuff. A lot of the positive races are like, we warn you that you shouldn't be using that technology from these guys. Okay, but how the military thinks. It's like, I want the big guns. I want the big stuff. I want to build an aircraft carrier in space that's 100 miles long. We want to be all powerful. And in some ways, I think America's far ahead of the rest of the world. But combined, we may need that kind of defense because if you apply contract law into space, some people say it all comes from out there, our knowledge of contracts and agreements and treaties and things of that nature. And that's very important out there. You sign a contract, you better be beholden to it. And so via contracts and agreements and treaties and other things, we're probably slowly becoming a fairly decent partner to a lot of people out there in our Sagittarius arm, whether they be whatever their polarity is. But we're becoming a useful partner because we have the technology to expand to other star systems and also build a lot of gear. Americans are very good at building stuff. Earth humans are said to be very, very good at taking junk, putting it together with our technology and our engineers, and making something brand new that is actually really pretty good. It's not as good as a seventh density Arcturian mothership with a biosphere inside. We're not at that level, but Ford pickup truck or a tank version of something out in space, it's not bad. And we get technology and trade goods, and some of that may be nefarious, but remember, ethics and your perspective of something is different. On Earth, we have all these ethics, and we try to anyway. And it's like, oh my God, I would never do that. A corporation probably would. Because the ETs are like, well, we consider that evil out here. That's just a perspective you have on Earth. We don't, if we want to conquer, like the Klingons, who can conquer a few star systems, so what? They just pay their taxes, and everyone's happy, sort of. Because slavery is probably a thing.
Right.
That's constant. It's one of my constants throughout history that never changes. Slavery, all kinds.
Wow, is that really true? When you think about these groups that are operating in the background, especially promoting the UFO threat, do you think, and this is a personal question, that when they think of you, do you think they have a concern level because your dad was involved with Majestic in like thinking about how much you know and how much you'll put out on the record?
I don't think I'm very important in the scheme of things. I'm just another talking head. In a sense, yes, I'm connected with some of that. And the Mellons are deep into the deep state. But in the scheme of things, I mean, you're talking about averages. And the United States is 335 million people. How many people in the United States are into the UFO ET topic at all? Maybe 1 million?
Sure.
What's that? And then you and I are talking smack, and Farrell does his thing, and everyone does their thing, and it's like, so good for them. A couple million people around the world know some of the truth. Maybe there's a lot of disinformation in that, and they're like, so what? How does that bother us in the corporate?
Yeah.
Who's going to believe them? And even if you have this light show coming up within 10 years, that's a war in our atmosphere. It's still given. I go back to the thing I said before. It's like they're going to be like, yeah. So we're dealing with ET. We've got a corporate system out there, and Lockheed Martin and Jeff Bezos is out there. So what? What are you going to do about it? You better get back to work, or back to school, and back in your cubicle with your computer on a 12-hour workday. Oh, by the way, we have 12-hour workdays. You can do that with the Elon Musk chip in your head. More adrenaline, more you're better, better vaccines, genetics, and you're even more of a cubicle slave. I mean, that's where I see America going eventually. I don't know, 25, 30, 40, 50 years. They're trying to massage that, even more of a slave system. And there won't be any internet, there'll be an internet, but there won't be any YouTube with naysayers like you and me and others talking smack. They'll get rid of all that. Those are dissidents. You don't want to be involved in a dissident. It's like China. They're having they shame people for not paying their taxes with a picture, electronic screen. Well, they're coming out with booths to put an actual person in a booth, like it's putting a person in stocks, with their head and their hands through a wooden stock. In the 1600s, they were shaming them for being a thief or a religious dissident or anything that was against the status quo. It's not only a torture, it hurts, days and days in a stock, but you're shaming, which is a powerful, powerful, powerful tool. And the Chinese are like, oh yeah, we're all over it. We're going to shame society into compliance. And everyone
they're going
on Twitter,
totalitarian. It's unbelievable. Yeah,
they joke about it, but it's no joke. If you look through history, they've used it before, and it's effective. It won't get rid of dissidents and naysayers, but it'll give them great pause and make them behave more in a certain way. It's these kinds of things are coming. I mean, my God, the tolls just in Washington, D.C. and Virginia, you got to go everywhere with an easy pass. So not only are they tracking you, there's no privacy. That's gone 30 years ago. But they track you, and now if you move it from car to car, I've gotten tickets. Oh, we caught you, Warner, again. I mean, they're big brothers everywhere now.
Unbelievable.
You can't do anything or say anything without people knowing about it. And that's also a two-way street, and it's like, well, maybe that's not a bad thing for certain messages. But I mean, Twitter is a poor barometer of anything. But It's mostly a hive
I'm
mind.
so glad you're back on there.
Government and program. Yeah, you and I are dissidents.
Absolutely. 100%. John, the final thing I want to ask you is about the book. You got the new book out. Tell us what it's about. And we know it's in this series. You just did Lion, Tiger, Bear. And people who follow the X series would be very comfortable with the topics that you get into because you go deep on the hidden side of things.
Yeah, the title is Sanity is a Luxury. And that's a quote from Ernst Schaefer of the On and Airbay SS. There's a meeting with my characters and them in Prague or Pilsen, the Skoda works. And of course, my team is after the Gustav gun and its ordnance, and Hans Kammler, and they're up against him. And they're talking about all these German Wunderwaffe technologies, but they're also talking about the occult and what the SS is probably doing at Wewelsburg Castle, probably some Babylonian dark rituals and human sacrifice. And there's a story about, I can't even say it. It's horrible. There's some horrible stuff in it, but Ernst Schaefer goes, sanity is a luxury we can't afford right now. Because I have him and Edmund Gear. They're still loyal Nazis to a degree, but they're kind of on the rat line already in 1943. They're like, all this stuff is going off the rails in Germany, and the Wunderwaffe program is definitely into anti-gravity, and they're trying to make discs fly, and technology doesn't work, but you never know with all these programs, and which I think the Germans were into. I think they got some discs to wobble around and fly a little bit, but they didn't have any weapons. But maybe they got that done in 1947 when Nimitz and Admiral Byrd came calling in Project Hijack, the operation. I mean, I can't believe that's public still. I mean, there's a Navy movie about it. It's like, wait a minute. But Farrell's dug that out brilliantly. It's like, there's no reason for it. So it's some very strange things. And, I mentioned Carl Jung, and I have Alan Dulles as a character in the book, and Kammler's a major character. So it's shorter and it's to the point. And I have the Gustav gun lobbing atomic ordnance on the Eastern Front.
Wow.
And maybe them using the Taban nerve gas, which is a possibility. And, 27 million Russian casualties, maybe 30, according to some Russians that I've talked to. And they're like, man, how do you do that? Yes, frostbite, starvation, disease. The penal battalions are overblown. They had some of that. And of course, if you light off a tactical nuke and it comes down, maybe your troops would retreat when they see tanks being melted down, troops on fire en masse. Yeah, that would make anyone retreat. But you don't want to shoot a lot of your troops. And that's just dumb. The Russians were brutal, but they weren't dumb.
Right.
And they were very brave. At least everyone's like, I hate Russia, poor Ukraine. It's like, well, there's a lot of stuff going on in there. I'm generally with Putin now because Biden went over there and shook hands with the Ukrainian president.
Unbelievable.
Bad move.
What kind of a message? I mean, that's
a terrible.
He's over there saying we'll guarantee Ukrainian pensions.
That's just whatever.
Yeah.
That's a bad move. That says the United States has its arm around the Ukrainian president, and it's like, that's not good. We need to stay out of that fight. And now we're in it. That's really bad news. You don't want to, it's one thing for NATO, the United States, to do some secret stuff. Okay, that's, just like the Mujahideen, 30, 40 years ago. But now we're publicly in it, supporting him. And now that automatically I'm with Putin and the Russians. They're not saints. They're brutal. But
where's the peace process?
There is none. It's not a war to be won. It's a battle to keep going because it's serving agendas. And I don't know what the Russians, but I'll say it till the end of time. Putin must have a damn good reason to attack Ukraine. The Russians don't do something like that unless there's a big, big payoff in whatever. I don't care, biolabs, the information is all over the place. But he wouldn't have done that willy-nilly. You just don't do that to further his economy. That's no help to his economy. And it makes them look like shit on the world stage because the media has spun it, Ukraine good, Russia bad. And there's no way. It's 1 million shades of gray in there.
Mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
think it's terrible news.
It's highly destabilizing, dangerous nuclear situation there.
Coming right
It
after
would
the
face
balloon
off.
flap.
Yes. Right.
The
That's
timing,
strange. Unbelievable.
the timing is odd. So
No
I think
question.
it's bad news. Well, I didn't like Biden before. I mean, I'm suspicious of all politicians and presidents, but now I really
Yeah.
dislike him now. That's a dumb, dangerous thing to do. And boy, I think these black hats in the deep state are really pulling some rabbits out of a hat. And maybe these other factions that are lighter gray hats are like, you keep doing this shit, we're going to light up the skies with UAPs and we're going to get a hot war going. And then all this stuff, whatever the truth is of everything, it's all going to start to leak out through cracks. It's like a tank's armor. You hit it with a round, you can crack certain plates of armor and, horrible things start leaking out. And so I think that's probably what we're seeing is an advancement of this old rivalry between factions around the world, but now it's starting to get hotter. And Biden's showing up in Ukraine for coffee with the president. That's bad news. I mean, are we going to start airlifting tanks? And are we already supporting him with satellite weapons and other clandestine weapons that you can't see in the air? Maybe that's the only way Ukraine is standing its ground against Russia is exotic weapons that we can't see. Oh, you didn't see that? That has optical visibility. But that Russian tank battalion no longer exists. That's funny. How did Ukraine do that on a shoestring budget with a shoestring military? Everyone's like, oh, they've got all kinds of MiGs. And a MiG? That's World War II technology, jet aircraft.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Any one of these wars is a proxy war. God knows who's really in the mix. Probably a lot of people are in the mix. And now it's really a dangerous move. I thought it was winding down. Oh no, this is bad news.
Unbelievable.
World War III nukes, and I'm like, I don't have to worry about that. But what you might have to worry about is a deep state war, factions that goes hot and visible. That's what worries me, because then people won't know what to think about anything. And I think that's the point. They want to keep people confused and keep your eyes on Chinese balloons and on the bad Russian bear.
Right.
They're our enemies, not these strange things flying around. They're not. Don't worry about that. We've got it under control. Rubio, visit Rubio's office.
Hey, we shut them down. Van Herk said we adjusted the sensors. We can see everything now. It's all set.
Yeah, sure. We got the new scalar radar. Giant radar comes out of a mountain. Come on.
We were vulnerable for 75 years, but now it's okay.
Yeah, everything's okay now. Yeah, he is kind of playing that character of from the 7 Days of May. There's a flavor of that.
Absolutely.
Now that's inflammatory, but it's true.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. John,
maybe
where? We'll find that out next. I know the whole alien exchange that he had with the New York Times embedded Pentagon reporter Helene Cooper. She's the one who launched Elizondo in 2017 with Leslie Kean in the New York Times article, and she's the one who raised the alien thing with him. And he said, "Oh, I'm not ruling anything out." He had to know that was going to rifle all over the world with that very dangerous headline. So he's playing into it. Yeah, no question about it.
I don't think he's separate from the UAP Arrow Task Force Rubio Mellon thing. I think he's part of that.
Mm-hmm. We've never had the COG commanders out front like that.
Not as publicly that I can remember. Certainly not doing with something like our airspace is compromised.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Boy,
that's the big tip-off, it seems to me, in the middle of all this.
That was part of the operation, because I don't think Tucker, whack job, but I don't think he would have said that without orders. He got his orders through channels.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's a terrible thing to say. because that gives the American people a feeling of insecurity that is bullshit. Nothing gets in our airspace, and I don't care if it's a couple of Russian moles coming here with satchel charges on their backs, 10 miles underground. You're still going to find them. It's unconscionable to say that. So they're putting it to the American people, and in some senses the world, that, oh no, American airspace has been compromised, and now Putin, Biden is over there talking with the Ukrainians, putting his arm around Ukraine, saying, "We got your back." Russia bad, and we've never been enemies with the Russians. Yeah, some dogfights with MiGs in Korea and Vietnam, sure. Some advisors, a couple pistol fights, maybe a couple subs ramming into each other. Sorry, but we've never been really fought the Russians. They've always been our allies, and so I think part of the deep state that is the lighter gray hats, they're still allies with the Russians. But these darker gray hats, like Arrow and Rubio and the task force and everybody, they're pro-Ukraine. I think they're showing their cards clearly. And to people like you and me and others, it's like, whoa. The general public is just a mishmash of confusing, stories. But it's like, wait a minute. I really do think these factions, their fight is going hot, and it's going on the surface. What they've been doing underneath the ground and military bases, I don't know. But there's stories of hot warfare going on down there in tunnels and things like that. But now the images and the word that's been spread by the media and the holy cats, I think this is a time of great pause. It's a setback for the disclosure movement. We look like, oh, you people are idiots, just balloons.
Yeah,
knew it.
Right.
You naughty tinfoil hats. And they're going to pass legislation that amateur researchers, being jailed.
Right.
Be yourself. Bang our tin cups on the bars. Hey,
I demand to see General Van Herk.
Yeah, we'd be task force. Or we'd be dragooned into the Space Force and sent out yonder. Work for corporations.
We didn't even get into the Space Force today, but whoa. I mean, Trump puts this thing together. It's another branch of the armed services. Space is a war-fighting domain. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, they're showing you what's been a reality for 30, maybe even 35, 40 years. We've had some presence in space, and it's weaponized. And maybe it was defense. It is a portion of it is defensive, and maybe a portion of it isn't. Now, remember the Dutch East India companies and the British East India companies in the 1600s. They battled each other, but they were the first corporate, military bodies, entities had their own navy and their own army. Does that sound familiar?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a repeat of that, and it's like let's say there's a conglomerate of corporations in America. Let's say they're the XYZ conglomerate, and the XYZ Corp hires Space Force to protect their shipments of whatever rare earth minerals when they're mining the asteroid belt or Saturn rings or what have you, moons, and they're like under contract. There are other people out there, both human and non-human, who want our cargoes. Because the British East India Company, their ships were armed. And a lot of times the British Navy were like, hey, we're fighting, something over here. Can we borrow your ships and crews? And they were like, absolutely, king or queen, we'll do that, And they were paid for it. They're hired mercenaries. Yes, we're part of the British Navy, but we're getting paid for it. And this is what we're seeing today is the fruits of those two entities. It's like, look at, any large bank or a series of corporations, they probably have access to, someone in the military that says, we need protection when we're doing our mining operations in South America or Africa or wherever. We need, private security, and we need jets. And in some cases, we need armed vessels, because who knows what they're digging up. Let's say they dig up a crash UFO of decent size in Africa or South America, and they're going to ship it by ship. to New Orleans or whatever. They'll probably take the the Wright-Patterson in Ohio still, maybe.
Yeah.
They need protection from other nations and other bodies interested in that technology. That's the new gold, diamonds, and wheat and corn and that they're shipping. And so, yes, private armies are, my God, Whack-a-Hut and what's the other one that's in the Middle East now? They keep changing their names, Blackwater or something different.
Absolutely fascinating. The mercenary groups.
The sci-fi series, what is it, The Outer Rim or whatever? There's all these series that show us this.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever Hollywood shows us something, I pay attention. Mm-hmm. Because they're warming the public up. In my personal view, they're warming the public up, not only for the ET presence on Earth, but for this corporate military piece of it. Oh yeah, you saw that on the Netflix series, and oh, by the way, Dark is about Brookhaven Labs and time travel, and
that's right.
CERN colliders and other thing. Hey, you saw that on Dark, now you know, and everyone's gonna be like, yeah, I saw that. Okay, and it normalizes it.
Yes.
In the human psyche.
Right, exactly. You become acclimated to the entire wave of things they've been hiding from you. The question is, I wanted to ask you something to close everything out about the air shoot downs and all the rest of it. When all that stuff was going on, you had non-related air activity, like a huge meteorite slammed into Houston. And then we had a military helicopter go down in Huntsville, Alabama. And then over in Europe, we had a sky display of all this stuff. Do you think that these displays are related? And is that also testing out the coordination that we're talking about with the UFO threat piece?
I think it's possible. I mean, there are disasters every day of the week.
Sure.
They're just reported with an alarming alacrity now. Swiftness.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's hard to say, are they related or not? Because the deeper in the layers you go to the deep state and you try to understand what they're all about, it's like, wow, everything could be connected. A farmer shoots at a ball of fire, out of his barn, and it's like, well, that was connected to, Raven Rock. And what were they doing in Raven Rock? Well, they were testing a directional energy weapon, and there was a helicopter, and holy shit, the Mothman was driving the helicopter, in West Virginia. You're like, holy shit, it's all connected in a really weird way. And the weirdness isn't going to get any better. It's going to get more and more weird. Mm-hmm. All this stuff is very strange and weird already. And I'm like, holy shit, the tall whites come out and they're waving the rainbow flag and they're like, oh, we're with the minority. Things are going to get really weird. They've got to try to normalize some of this so that people don't panic and freak out too much. Mm-hmm. There'll be the Mormons will come out there. Well, we're going to get you to join the Mormons, the tall whites. They probably are some. In there, oh, those are our tall folks in the mountains.
They're our ancestors.
Of the Mormonism, but they like lots of wives and they have their Tic Tacs, But I think they're Volvos, but they call them Tic Tacs. The weirdness. I hope Americans don't get too frightened when things start to get weird, but some will. But I think. Given all the movies and media and all the weirdness and all the sci-fi, it's not really fiction anymore, but we really have become acclimated in some senses. I think in 2017, everyone was like, oh, I knew it. A lot of people were just like, oh, I knew it. They were like on the fence, whether to believe it or not. But then they were like, oh, I knew it. Jumped on the bandwagon. And so the bandwagon they have is pretty big. They got all these acronyms and Arrow and everywhere, the Air Force and military with them. And people are going to jump on that. They already are. I mean, Twitter is just everyone's on board with, they're like, Chris Mellon's a hero and Gary Nolan's a hero. And they got the hero worship going. And that's the bandwagon.
Yeah.
And by and large, people like the bandwagon. They don't want to go against the grain. They want to fit in. They want to be the cool kids. They want to fit in with the bandwagon. And Boy, the intel services, they know their business when they create this giant dog and pony show bandwagon with the bells and whistles and clowns, literally clowns in action, and we're viewing this from a hillside. And it's like, there's a train coming down the hill with humanity at speed. And, we're all on this hill waving flags and our hats, and no one can hear us or see us. And then we see the circus train, the bandwagons going by with the UAP task force, and the train and the jugglers and everything. It's all going to come and blow up sometime in the next 20 years or less. Probably the next 10 now. Seems to be accelerating. And
well, you mentioned Nolan. I mean, he has such a long history with the CIA, close friends with Anthony Fauci, pumps up Anthony Fauci, calls him a great. I mean, come on, how could the UFO people who want the truth think they're going to get anything close to the truth from a CIA Fauci-loving physicist? It's ridiculous.
I'm not sure, but it's this bandwagon idea.
Yeah.
People want to fit in. They don't want to. No, the government knows what it's doing. All those crazy people in the disclosure movement, they're wrong. There's no aliens. There's no space. Come on. God wouldn't do this to us chosen few. Come on. And we've got all that stuff. There are more and more religious people coming out and saying, "Oh, this perfectly works with a religion, life in the universe." So that's sort of going both ways. And I'm fine with that. I believe in religious freedom, but the other half is slowing us down a little bit. But social media, most people want to be with the cool kids in the bandwagon, and they don't want to get on board with the dirt, the dangerous kids and the hot rods and the leather jackets, like you and me and everyone. They don't want to be in case the cops come and arrest everybody. They don't want to be tainted with that.
Yeah.
And so it is that simple. I think it's the high school analogy. Most people want to be with the cool kids and the president of the class, Chris Mellon, and not with the kids in the leather jackets smoking, whatever, and drinking beer and the hot rods and breaking the law and the dangerous people. You're always going to be the minority.
Right.
It's just high school politics. This stuff, it's easy, clowns juggling balls. I mean, these are apt analogies. It's that simple. And when you're talking about, future invasions from Earth, I mean, you're talking about other high schools coming with baseball bats. They're going to beat us up. We better rally around the president and all the cool kids, and all the football players are on board with that. And all the pot smoking kids in leather jackets, they're the ones that really are going to defend us with the hot rods, and they got guns, intellectually speaking. And no, they want to be with everyone in the school jersey, not the leather jackets and T-shirts and the rolled up jeans. That's an analogy, but it's like they don't want to be caught with them. What if they're wrong? They're dissidents. That scares me, and it boils down to fear. This whole series of things, Americans, when they see Biden over there, half of America's like, or whatever, is like, yeah, we'll show those Russians, and the other half is like, wait a minute, this is really scary. They're going to drag us into World War III or whatever. And so now you've got two sets of cool kids, and it's like, who do we want to be on board with that operation? But as far as the UFO, ET, technology stuff, war in the sky, U.S. Space Force stuff goes, people are going to be really, really conservative on that as far as the American people go. But over time, that's going to slowly change. I think we'll always be in the minority, the disclosure arena folks. And everyone's like, oh, no, Gary Nolan is a great scientist. He's part of disclosure. And I'm like, no, that's part of the obfuscation program.
Yes.
You can't
co-opting.
They won't see it. It's cognitive dissonance. They're like, no, those are government people. You're just amateur, whatever, you're rabble rousers. And yes, but, it's, and they want somebody with an official title who has been in the military, or been a spook, or been, they want someone like Chris Mellon. They don't want someone like me. They don't want some free thinker, radical, whatever. That's scary to them. So This train wreck is coming. And the few of us in the disclosure movement on sitting on the hill, we might as well just open up a picnic and a bottle of wine and watch it, because there's not much we can do. The only thing we can do is be there for people after it happens. And when this big light show, alien, whatever, I keep using that word myself, ET military show happens and people are scared, and maybe the economy takes a huge hit. I don't think there'll be a financial collapse. We'll take a huge hit. There'll be millions of people out of jobs, scared to death. And it's like, it's up to a few of us, at least with our friends and family, is to be there for them and say, well, I'm not sure of anything, but here's what I think is really going on. And it has to be a climatic, huge event to get people to change their minds on things. Look at how isolationist America was before World War II, before Pearl Harbor.
Right.
This whatever's going to happen in the sky, this huge operation, whether it be the fake alien invasion, false flag, or whatever, there's something big going to come. It's not too dissimilar from Pearl Harbor, because imagine being Roosevelt and Marshall. Let's say they knew a day or two before that there was probably going to be a Japanese attack, either on the Philippines, Guam, or Hawaii, or Wake, or whatever, and didn't warn. And maybe we shouldn't tell anybody, because America was so isolationist.
Right.
We don't want to those European wars. We don't want to be a part of it. We've got a good life, good thing going here. Yes, the depression is easing, and overnight, it galvanized this country like nothing else. Even 9/11, which was a seminal event, was not as powerful as Pearl Harbor, but it was close.
Yeah.
And this kind of whatever sky show is, whatever happens, or something else, I don't know, happens, they want the UAP task force, the bandwagon. They want to galvanize most of America behind them. It's a threat. Support your local Space Force. Send your kids to join up now. Seriously. Need recruits. Join the Navy. I don't care. Naval Space Command and Kwajalein Island. Some strange things going on there. Or Diego Garcia. Pretty private places for space operations. And that they'll do that. And most of America probably will go that way, because it's a new Pearl Harbor. They'll call it a new Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
The space Japanese attacked. Maybe they'll blow up Pearl Harbor for real. I don't know, but it's symbolism. And we're going to be in a real mess. But there will be I don't know, 10% of America that will be like, wait a minute. This can't be. This is not kosher. Maybe these tinfoil hat people have a point. And that's when I tell people this privately in the email. They ask me for advice. I said, we all have a huge responsibility to be there for our immediate friends and family, maybe a few others. All of us in the disclosure, all of us. And what is that? 3 million people who died? I'm not sure. We've got a responsibility to those people. I really do. Because they're going to be confused and scared. And I don't blame them.
Wow, great point. John, fantastic information. And I really appreciate you coming forward in all these interviews that we've done together. And just the fact of your presence in the middle of all this, I think, gives us an opportunity to look at things from a totally different perspective than what they're putting out. And especially with the things that you've inherited with your family and the dynamics things that you've done on your own in relation to this, I think your voice and all of it makes a huge difference. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I'm as angry as anybody else out there who's got a few brain cells put together correctly. It's just, we all do our parts. We all try to be service to others and do something. We've got to do something. Even if the human race evaporates in 50 years, it's like, we'll never be forgotten by the universe. And they'll say, well, at least some people cared.
Yes.
They won't mention any names. They'll just say, well, the part of the human race was really trying to help others and change and evolve the human race for the better. And, We go down fighting. It's like Churchill said, nations that fight on to the end, they rise again.
Right.
Not the nations that capitulate. And I don't want America to capitulate to this bandwagon dog and pony show, because that's appeasement. We're right back in World War II, Britain, Neville Chamberlain appeasing to the Germans.
Unbelievable.
And Churchill and others who knew about the Nazi SS and the occult and the Wunderwaffe and all that stuff, even in 1939, they knew about it through channels, Freemasons and other groups, Knights of Malta. They knew, and they knew they were going to go to war. Same with FDR, Marshall, they were both Freemasons. FDR was an odd fellow. It's the same thing as the Freemasons. I don't want to get in that argument. But they knew. And that's probably why they probably cried at their desks during Pearl Harbor. It's something they probably had to do. And if you and I and everyone else out there watching this, they probably, I wonder what we would have done, because the Germans and Japanese were going to attack us at some point. Why wait till it comes? We know it's coming. We know it, because their rockets are maturing, and they could decimate the East Coast. And the Japanese with balloons and viruses, and they had diseased fleas, I think with bubonic plague.
Wow.
And they were going to drop those by balloons. And then they had an idea of building giant flying boats to fly at night over the west coast of the United States and unleash all kinds of strange weapons, including fleas that were infested with bubonic plague. That would have caused huge casualties in America. Yeah, this war is very dirty. And we're seeing certain signs of things like that. And it's like, I don't care what anyone says, we are at war around the world, whether people understand it or not. We've been at war since World War II. It never really ended. We've been at war. And it's like the enemies and the combatants have changed, and they continue to change. But we're constantly in this fight, whether either it's sub rosa in secret or on the surface. And now we're starting to see things on the surface. And that's Biden and Ukraine.
Yeah.
So.
Remarkable. John, great to see you. And I'm looking
by the way,
forward.
I just wanted I blame the Germans for everything. It's just a blanket statement. Blame the Germans for everything. They got
now they're sending tanks to Ukraine. All right.
Farrell's right. The German Space Agency. The Germans have got their hands in this. And then they always say, there's Germans in space. And I'm like, it wouldn't surprise me if the majority of the human presence out in this part of the galaxy was German. That would not surprise me.
Wow. Yeah.
Leave it to that, man.
There's an untold chapter in history there for sure. But it's great to see you. And the book is?
Sanity Was a Luxury. It's not out yet.
Is it available?
Okay. No. I'm waiting on my graphic designer. She's a wonderful, talented young woman, and she's going to lay out the book and everything solid, but she's a little behind. So I got to be patient. But it'll be out probably by the summer.
It's coming, for sure.
It's coming.
Fantastic. John, just remarkable information tonight. As you said, the new book, Sanity Was a Luxury, coming up soon, and your historical novel dealing with exotic technology, Lion, Tiger, Bear, just fascinating. We'll have John back shortly with more revelations. Please visit darkjournalist.com for more and sign up for our newsletter. Join us on Friday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, for the Dark Journalist X series. See you soon.